Hello my dear sewing friends, we are at it again. We are going to take these fabric scraps and turn them into a beautiful garment. Now these are the fabrics that I'm thinking about including in this project, and as you can see I have already sorted these out. Mostly natural fibers. I have cotton linen blend, I have cotton with a little bit of elastane, so this one has a little bit of stretch to it. I have pure linen, pure cotton, lace, which is natural fiber blended with polyester. I'm just not sure exactly the percentages. A little bit of stretch denim, a couple of other fabrics. So I think the project itself is going to be quite eclectic. I do have a rough idea in my mind, so let's get to it and let's see where it takes us. The main idea is to create something between a shirt and a jacket, and I've been wearing these for a couple of years now and I really like them. In fact, when I wear this one in the videos, you guys always ask me if there's a tutorial for it and how did I make it. This is just a button-up shirt. In fact, it's the same one that we developed together with members and members only mini-series from our bodice block. So there's nothing extra about it. It's just something that I wear on top because it has enough ease to accommodate it. So with a few minor adjustments, this is what we're going to use as a base for today's project. My first decision is to fold in the curved hem because I want the hem to be straight on my future jacket. And the next thing that I did is to mark the approximate position of the front yoke. Let me get these fabric scraps back in the box and then we're gonna get the base pattern and we're going to modify it real quick. Sometimes in the comments underneath these kind of videos, I do get asked, what is sort of like the true starting point for projects like these? And usually people ask whether I start with fabric scraps first and then I adapt my design and pattern for it, or do I start with the design and the pattern and then I look for fabric scraps to complement it? And I think this is a really interesting topic because it can be one, it can be the other, it can be a combination of both. Sometimes it really depends on how solid and strong is your idea, how committed you are to it, and how much are you willing to sort of compromise on it. Sometimes the idea is there, but it morphs in a process. So it just really depends. Of course, the amount of fabric scraps that you have and how big they are also play a really huge role. Like for example, in this case, that's why right now I'm going to start with the adjustments to the pattern first, because then I will be able to see if I have enough fabric scraps to bring my vision to life. Now, first, of course, I need to make a copy of the button-up shirt pattern draft that I'm going to be using as my base. Next, I'm going to be adding just a little bit of ease to it since this is the outerwear garment. I will add a little bit at the shoulder seam, next a little bit at the side seam, and then I will also lower the armhole just by a little bit. After that, of course, I will mark the adjustments that I did on the body, which was marking the front yoke and the new hem. Now, because I did the adjustments for the armhole, then of course I need to make sure that I fit the new sleeve. I pulled my fabric scraps back out so that way I can see if I have enough for the idea, and if I do, how am I going to arrange them? And I actually brought you a little project over here that sort of served a little bit as an inspiration. I don't want to do this kind of patchwork on my shirt jacket, but when I was working on it, and the project isn't done just yet, I thought, you know what? This actually looks like a really nice color combination that I would like to wear. So that's kind of where part of the inspiration for this project comes from. But as I said, I don't want to do small pieces like that. So that's what I have to figure out. Like how this lace looks on the beige underneath, but at the same time not 100%. I like the combination of white and beige. I'm just not sure I'm just not sure about this particular lace. I think I've decided that I'm going to do beige on the top yoke in the front and in the back, but I want to add a little bit of white in it, and I want to add a little bit of interest. And one of the ways to do that would be with lace, but I'm not 100% in love with that. The other way would be to stamp it or block print it. Another way to achieve an interesting result would be to paint it, or I can also do a little bit of embroidery. My creative gut is saying, let's go with the latter. So I'm starting by giving my stretch cotton fabric scraps a good press. After that, I need to see how can I actually cut all of the necessary pattern pieces out of what I have. And so far I'm thinking, let's do the front yoke, then of course the back yoke, collar, and perhaps some pocket flaps as well. Now I'm not going to cut anything out just yet because first I need to do the embroidery. The original idea that I had was to do a floral motif, so I sketched out a few flowers, and next I'm going to use carbon paper to trace them on my fabric. Now because my fabric pieces are so irregular, I'm going to use a tearaway stabilizer to help me with that. Plus, it will also reduce puckering that is caused by the embroidery. After that, all I have to do is pop it into a hoop and get started on that embroidery. It did take quite a lot of hours to get it all done, but you know how it is when you are committed to the idea, when you want it to come to life, you're all in it. Now, after the initial embroidery was done, I also had to remove the stabilizer from the back, after which I usually like to give my project a really gentle hand wash and a really good press. After that, we can finally take a look at what we have so far. At this point, I can finally start cutting my pattern pieces out. And while I get that done, I wanted to share with you that you can do this type of embroidery on basically any sewing machine that has a straight stitch. You should be able to do it. I've done it on my Burnett, I've done it on my Zinger, and my daughter has a very simple entry-level brother sewing machine under $100, and I was able to do it on it as well. And I've even made a video for you guys where I shared with you basic steps on how to get started with this technique. So if you want to add a little bit of interest to your sewing projects, if you want to get creative, I will leave that for you guys in the description of this video. To prevent unraveling of the thread, I lightly interfaced all edges of the pattern pieces. Now, I couldn't cut the back yoke all as one, so it will have a center back seam. After that, from the smaller fabric scraps, I managed to cut 2 pocket flaps. I then lined them with cotton poplin scraps, and I used the same fabric to cut bias binding. Now, this is what I have so far, and I must say that I really like the white edge around the pocket flaps. Next, from these fabric scraps, I have to figure out the main body of the jacket, and because I don't have enough for a full front or back pattern piece, of course, I'm opting for a side panel. And I know that I do these quite often in my scrap fabric mix, but that's because it's such a useful option for when fabric is really tight and you're working with different colors. Now, the side panel is going to be cut from this blue cotton linen blend, and the front and then the back is going to be cut from the same blend, but in this oatmeal beige. This part definitely takes a good chunk of time, and I know that I've mentioned this before, but it just really does. It's one of those things that you can't really skip over because everything matters. The color, the texture, the combination and the size of the fabric scraps, as well as the weight. Weight here is especially important in this project because I am working with fabrics of different weight. In this case, the cotton linen blend that I'm using for the bottom part of the jacket is just a tad bit lighter than than the stretch bottom weight cotton that I used for the front and back yoke. But then of course add a little bit of embroidery in the mix, which definitely stiffens up, and I'm going to line it with cotton voile. And although I'm only doing it to preserve all of that stitching of embroidery, it does create a little bit of discrepancy of weight between the fabrics. So in situations like these, I try to think, where can I use this to my advantage? And sometimes it doesn't work out, but most of the times it actually does. So I think, okay, here I'm working on quite a structured garment, and I have fabrics that are a little bit heavier and fabrics that are a little bit lighter. So where can I use and how can I position those slightly heavier fabrics to complement that structured garment? And usually that would be right here on top, because we also have gravity that of course pulls everything down. So I think it just makes sense to have heavier fabrics on top and lighter fabrics on the bottom, instead of vice versa, where you would have lighter fabrics on top and then heavier fabrics on the bottom that would pull more on those light fabrics and therefore causing a lot of stress in the garment. So far, I've got the back somewhat assembled, and take a look. I even put a little label on that I ordered specifically for my fabric scrap makes, so that way I remember them. So now let's move on to the front. Here I'm going to do two pockets. One will be at the top of the yoke and the other one on the side. The pocket bags are going to be lined with cotton poplin, and I'm going to use exactly the same fabric scraps to bind each entrance of the pocket. It seems that the front of the jacket is shaping up without too much trouble, fingers crossed. So I moved on to adding the side panel. Now you can see it already sewn in here amidst all of this creative chaos. And after I tried it on myself, there was nothing wrong with it. It just seemed a little bit plain and a little bit too utilitarian, and I wanted it to be a little bit more feminine. So I decided to jazz it up. What I did, I simply added a bit of fabric on the back side of the panel. I sewed 3 channels for the elastic to go through and create a really nice and really pretty cinched effect. Luckily, it did the trick for my taste, so I moved on to reattaching the side panel once again. I must say that despite the amount of stitches I had to take out and redo, I'm happy that I did. Next up, let me share with you a vision that I have for the sleeve. Now, right now, the pattern does look like a Frankenstein. I totally get it. And that's because I'm thinking to combine 3 different fabrics in it. Obviously, I'm working with fabric scraps, so I don't have enough for a full sleeve. Now for the middle, I have this remnant of pure white linen, and it is just wonderful, but it is just a tad bit lighter than all of the other fabrics in this mix. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sandwich it with light cotton poplin and then quilt it, so that way both fabrics become one and act as one. Now this entire thing turned out to be quite labor intensive, but yielding results that you can't quite see. Now halfway through, because of that, I did think about changing up the color of the thread so that way the quilting is actually visible. And I even did a couple of lines, which I then took out because I didn't quite like it. It didn't quite look right. So I decided to go with the original plan with white thread on white linen. After that, I went back to the pile of the fabric scraps in order to make up the rest of the sleeve. On the very top, I thought it would be a nice touch to add a little bit of the same fabric that I used for the front and the back yoke to sort of tie it all together. Plus, I didn't really have enough of the linen for the rest of the sleeve, so this kind of worked out. Next, I sewed and serged and put all of the parts of the sleeve together and then basted the sleeve itself into the armhole to sort of, see the mid-progress, at which point I realized that I made a major mistake. I'm somewhat calm about it right now, but in the moment, in the thick of it, man, I was sweating buckets. So take a look. This beige part of the sleeve is cut with a straight bottom, but because this particular sleeve is a relaxed fit sleeve, it doesn't hang straight down. When the sleeve is sewn in, this part appears to be on the angle, and especially when you wear it, to my eye, it does look quite awkward. I can't even begin to describe how hard I was kicking myself about it. And of course, what else can I do? I went back to the pattern draft and then I curved in the line as much as I could based on the beige fabric scraps that I was left with. After that, I kid you not, I took a deep breath, I made myself a cup of tea, and I proceeded to take out the seam of the sleeve cap. Fast forward about an hour or so, here's the new and improved sleeve. Let me show you the insides of it. This little cotton voile hides all of the embroidery stitching of the beige fabric. Now the saga of the sleeve isn't over just yet because the sleeve itself isn't long enough. This time it's by design though, because next I'm going to add cuffs. Now I have set aside fabric scraps of this oatmeal color cotton linen blend and I'm going to use it for the cuffs. To match the style of the overall jacket and the pocket flaps, the cuff is also going to feature curved edges. And then I finished it with white bias tape. Next, I overlapped the edges of the cuff and attached it to the sleeve. And here you can see how it looks when it's done. I definitely need to take a little bit of a mental break from the sleeves, so instead of continuing with them, let me finish the hem. Here I decided to shorten it, then to curve in the corners, and just like all of the other little details, finish it with bias tape. I wanted to take a moment and say thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate it. You have no idea how much it gets my juices going, my creative process, knowing that you guys are also excited about using up those fabric scraps and making something really creative, combining that creativity and sewing and putting it all in one, because you are all so creative. It amazes me. And you know, I know that a lot of you are on Instagram. It's not necessarily my environment, so I don't really post anything often at all. But if you've made something for fabric scraps, or maybe perhaps you're in a process, would you please tag me? I would love to see what you guys are up to. And I promise I'll make an effort to check Instagram more often. Usually it's like a couple times a week now, but I'll make sure that I check it more often so that way I don't miss anything. So I wanted to say thank you so much. And to those of you who are members of the channel, again, from the bottom of my heart, I truly appreciate all of your support. And make sure that you check all of your members' perks because there is a deep dive video coming up for this particular jacket. We're gonna take a look inside of the jacket, talk about some interesting details, and a lot more. Speaking of the insides, after finally attaching the sleeves, I bias bound the armholes. Half was done on the sewing machine and half was done by hand. Now let me show you what I have so far. And I actually do like it just the way it is, but my heart is really set on adding a collar. Now because I had to rework the sleeve and therefore cut new pattern pieces, I have barely any fabric left, so the collar will have a center back seam. It is also bias bound all around because the neatest way to attach it in this particular case would be also by hand. We are so close to the finish line. I can almost taste it. All right, after the collar is in, the last thing to do for me is to figure out the closures. And I really want to use snaps. So I constructed this sort of stylized button placket extension. Now I realize it is not everyone's cup of tea, but I think that's what makes sewing so exciting because we get to bring our vision to life. And with that being said, all right, let's take a look at the final result. With all of the ups and downs of this project, I'm really happy that I stuck it through. And I love that I can pair this lightweight jacket with a hoodie. I can pair it with a sweater, even with more ornate and romantic blouse. And because everything is functional, I can wear it closed or I can wear it open. Whew, what a journey, wasn't it? And I really want to thank you for coming along with me through the entire process. It was definitely an interesting one. Thank you so much for being here. And if you want to see more fabric scrap projects, for example, this one, then click on the video right over here. And I truly hope that will give you that inspiration and a little bit of a push to look at your fabric scraps in a different light. And until next time, happy, thoughtful sewing. I'll see you soon. Bye!